Our next speaker, Benjamin Joff, he is a partner at HEX, which is the world's most active investor in hardware startups. In the last 5 years, they invested in more than 200 startups. He lived himself in Asia for 15 plus years, speaks 6 languages, and he wrote for Forbes, TechCrunch, and VentureBeat. And most importantly, he's now back here on the Academy stage Pioneers for the 5th time, which is something I'm really happy about. And now, like a teaser, the original session was titled Lessons from Real and Practical Hardware Startups. So we asked for a pivot of this session because something fresh just emerged before Pioneers, which is that they released their annual hardware trends report. So it's just being finalized, it's just fresh out. This is basically, an exclusive audience to hear this first time in Europe. Take it as a private preview. So he'll talk about like trends, opportunities, and the good and bad that we see in the hardware sector and guide you to. So without further ado, please welcome on stage, Benjamin Joff.
All right, good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here for the 5th time. It's quite crazy. We actually also invested in a couple of local startups in the meantime, on some other startups as well that we met here. So yes, speeches can pivot too. We have some fresh content, and I hope it will be interesting for you. There's a lot to share, so if you have questions, we won't have time for that. So please email me, tweet to me, or meet me after the session in the bar area. But without further ado, let's get started. So this is what we're going to talk about. Basically, some big trends in the hardware space, and then we'll dive into some more specific categories. So to get started quickly, so HEX is part of a global group called SOSV. It's basically a large fund. We have $300 million under management. We invest in over 700 startups. We're a leader in IoT, life sciences, ag tech, and also women-led startups, which is about 1/4 of our portfolio. HEX is the hardware branch. We have offices in Shenzhen, the Silicon Valley for hardware, and San Francisco, the other Silicon Valley. Yesterday, I was at a hardware meetup, actually downtown, and one guy was saying, oh, I was in the Bay Area the other day. People were like, OK, so San Francisco? I said, no, the other one. The Shenzhen, like the greater Bay Area, the more important one for hardware. So let's get started now about trends. So global trends, I think what's interesting is to see some M&As pick up. M&As is the most likely exit for a startup. And what's interesting with hardware is that a lot of those M&As happen with non-tech companies. VC is also growing. It's not crypto, but it's pretty good still. There's a number of specialists that have emerged. The number of IPOs in hardware also grew. Number of unicorns, particularly in China, has grown quite fast. And I'll have a few slides tell you more about China as well. So just to quote a few M&As, you can see some activity. Probably the most recent big one is Mobike, the orange Chinese bicycles that are now everywhere in the world. This company didn't exist 3 years ago, and it's been acquired for $2.7 billion by another Chinese company. One of our portfolio companies called Jump Bikes got acquired by Uber for an undisclosed sum, but quite large. And you can see basically what happened. So the financing overall have increased. This is also good. Number of IPOs, some of them were kind of long in the making, like Roku or Sonos. You could say Razer as well. Xiaomi is coming soon. This valuation should be between somewhere 50 and 100 billion. Huami, which is probably not so well known, is the Chinese Fitbit. Actually more profitable than Fitbit, but is mostly in China. It's one of the Xiaomi portfolio companies, so they mostly distribute via Xiaomi. But they're expanding. Number of hardware unicorns. What's interesting is that some of them became unicorns really quickly. For example, Desktop Metal was created in 2015, the 3D printer for metal, and a number of other ones. Some still waiting for their products, like Magic Leap, but it's coming, they say. So China stuff. This is Shenzhen. Overall, everything is up. More money, more startups, more IP, more robots, more AI. Let's go into details. Global VC funding. China overtook the US last year. Oh, no, this year, sorry. This year. Oh, last year too. So, both. So there's a lot of money in China. Doesn't mean it's easy to get, but if you're a Chinese startup, you're probably in better luck than if you're not a Chinese startup. They're also pretty aggressively investing overseas. Those are Chinese hardware unicorns, quite a few of them. A number of them as electric vehicles, bike sharing, but also consumer robots, smart devices, and you might know Ninebot, the company that acquired Segway, and is now like basically one of the giants in that space. Many of them are very young. They get money and they scale super fast. A few examples in the electric vehicle space, from electric cars to autonomous vehicles to delivery vehicles. China is rising as an innovator. If number of patents is the right metric to look at, if you look at patents filed in the US, China is number 2 after the US. Within 2 years, they might be number 1. The 2 companies that are filing the most patents in the world are both Chinese, Huawei, ZTE. Actually, this reflected also in our investments. You can see over the years, we actually increased the share of Chinese companies in our portfolio. We see better and better companies coming out of China. US also still quite large. And Canada is actually doing surprisingly well compared to its size. So let's look now into categories. So we've invested in over 200 companies over the years. These days, we invest in about 4 or 5 companies every month. That's about 40, 50 a year, roughly. We bring them to Shenzhen for a few months. They learn about the supply chain. They get a lot of hands-on support with our team, about 30 people. And then once they do like fast prototyping, much faster in China, the key of China is not cost. The key of China is speed. Speed and expertise. That's what you find in Shenzhen. Once you make your product, you launch it, and then you need to scale it. And for that, you go to San Francisco, you try to connect to the US market, and we have a follow-on program there. So as you can see, what's really remarkable is that IoT used to be a lot about consumer stuff. And now consumer, sort of really like who bought an IoT product and is happy with it, a product that is not Alexa, for example. Not so many people. I was talking with telco people in Paris just yesterday, and discussing about, oh, how is the IoT thing going for you? And they're like, oh, we don't want to talk about it. Like, they don't know what to do to sell to consumers, basically. There's a lot of products, but nobody's really buying them. What's working, though, is getting products connected to cellular networks. So that's one of the big changes, is that we're going from like annoying Wi-Fi setup to having cellular IoT, where you just bring the product and just it works everywhere because it's connected to cellular. And for us, the B2C went down because B2B actually improved a lot. So much better products, much more science, much more interesting tech, AI everywhere. And I'll give you some examples. So some consumer hardware trends. So the old trends, I think, need to address. Hardware is still hard. Consumers are very price sensitive. Anything above 100 euros, $100, difficult to sell. The need is not always clear. For consumers, everything is kind of a nice to have, not a must have. So it's losing momentum compared to B2B. 2017, maybe trackers were still exciting. Today, not so much. It's kind of a commodity. Drones, OK, I've seen a drone. I think DJI, won that battle. There's a bunch of other companies trying to get the rest. 3D printing, no, you're not going to print everything in your house. I think that's pretty clear now. Basically, that's not so much for consumers. VR, there may be some hope with the Oculus Go. Apparently, the price point is quite right. I suspect that the killer app for VR for consumers is Netflix. Watching Netflix on your bed with the Oculus Go on your face. I think that's what's going to happen. Not like some fancy thing you're going to do in your living room to do some active play or whatever. I don't think that's the way. But, well, Netflix sounds good to me. Smart home, so not selling much yet. And the question, because consumers don't want to pay, is who's going to pay? And one potential solution for that is utility companies, insurance companies paying for you because they save money or they can improve their business. If they can regulate the grid, for example, as an energy company, it's valuable. If they can avoid some trouble or check claims of any asset you have or property, then it's also good for insurers. So they might be more motivated. Some of them are partnering actually with IoT companies to help spread devices. Voice agents, that was probably the big news last year, and even before. Alexa probably won so far. Not sure who else. So I don't know, like anybody uses a voice agent like Alexa, Google Home, like raise your hand if you have one of those. Okay, not so many. Oh, maybe not in, maybe it's not launched in Austria. Yeah, I'm waiting for it in France. I actually bought it in US, but I can only speak in English to it in Paris, and there's some functions that don't work. Like you cannot order an Uber, cannot order a pizza, and mostly I say, Alexa, play some jazz. So now it's in the video, so anybody who plays the video is going to play in their home when they listen to it. That's kind of fun. The killer app might be news, Spotify, maybe some on-demand stuff. We'll see. New consumer trends, so advanced tracking, market still limited for specialized sports, for instance. Premium and personalized, that's interesting. So premium products doing aftermarket personalization. I'll give some examples. Digital coaching, also interesting. So AI or devices that not only track you, but actually coach you, teach you. The future is, yes, robots will take our jobs, AI will take our jobs, some of the jobs, but robots and AI will also teach us much better than we used to be. And it's kind of closing the loop in learning. STEM products, this is a real need. Parents want their kids to be smart. So there's real need, real money. The government also wants that, particularly in China. China has huge budgets for education, and that's great for some startups there. Overall, I think what we see in the media tends always to focus on what's shiny, not necessarily what's useful. Typically, they like things that move, things that look like old sci-fi, and it's pretty poor guide, actually, to evaluate innovation. But that's essentially what we see, rather than useful daily things. So the hardware funding for consumer, still OK. It's not too bad. Not particularly like booming, but it's OK. I'll give an example of a STEM product from our portfolio. It's actually our best performing company. It's a company called MakeBlock, and they make STEM robots. This is another one. I'm going a little bit fast on the video, but MakeBlock started with very simple product on Kickstarter about 5 years ago, and now they have 500 staff, tens of millions in revenue. They raised a Series B of 30 million. Valuation is in a couple hundred million plus, and they sell to schools, they sell to makers, and they sell internationally. And it's one of those Chinese companies building global brands, and there's going to be more and more of those. Neura is an interesting product as well. It's a pair of headphones that can test your hearing and adapt to it automatically. You just put them on. There's like a 1-minute calibration where you don't need to do anything aside from you just press a button once. And then it can recognize your sensitivity to different frequencies and give you the best sound for your ears. And that's really an example of aftermarket personalization that we want. Because factories make 1 million products, but ideally, we don't want 1 million of the same. We want 1 million different products because we're all different. Post Juice Zero, so you heard of Juice Zero, the juicer machine that was kind of a bit of a scandal because they claimed that you need like crazy pressure to do cold press juice, when in fact you could squeeze by hand. It was kind of ridiculous. So there's some more bad news. That's like a number of companies went bankrupt, and that's a really bad thing when you're an investor because you're like, oh, all those companies going bankrupt, all this money wasted, it means the sector is like poisoned. Let's not put any more money. But there was also some good news. So Ring exited to Amazon for $1 billion, and a number of other exits. Not too bad. What's interesting is to notice that some of the buyers are not tech companies. Assa Abloy is a security company. Electrolux is pretty standard, like a home appliance company. So this is also quite interesting, is that hardware is really something different from software because it deals with the physical world. It deals with the atoms, the world around us, our bodies. And that's something software alone cannot do. Quick timeline to show that consumer products have some hope if they manage to find some hooks into B2B. So that's August, another like a home lock company. They went to B2B, and eventually that led to their acquisition and the growth of the business. To talk about aftermarket personalization, so that's kind of the second wave coffee. But people want today more sophisticated, better quality coffee. But they can't do it at home because you can't brew at home because you're not a barista. It's complicated to get all the parameters right between dilution, temperature, acidity, all those things, brewing time. Well, now there's a machine that can do it. This company, Orenda, we invested in, is basically a personal barista. You can control all these parameters of actually the machine can control it. With the same beans, you can actually tune the taste. And once you have a taste you like, you can always get the exact same one. So that's one of those trends of basically getting the experts in your home, thanks to intelligent machines. So I mentioned voice agents. This is one of the big news. And so far, it looks like it's kind of nice to have services, but in some cases, it could be really interesting. And here's an example of a company we invested in based in Hong Kong that basically uses voice recognition to track the words babies and little children say and the number of meaningful interactions you have with them so that you can monitor the basically linguistic development of your child and see if you're active enough and if they're learning, at what pace they're learning. So that can really help with the development of children. So it's a quick video, I'll just skip it. Another interesting machine is more like kind of a toy, but it's basically a robot to teach you to play ping pong. And you can basically program drills on the machine very easily, and then you can practice. And you can see it can do like Olympic level spins, so you can really do very complex stuff. I don't know, is the video showing? The video is not showing all right, but anyway. So it's a company called TrainerBot. And that's a robot basically training people. They showed their product and they tested it with Olympic players from the Team USA. And the coach showed a serve. He said, hey, can you do that? And the serve was like going like a right angle after the rebound. And then the robot could do 100 times. And the coach was like, that's great, because then the robot can do this, and I can focus on designing drills, giving feedback, which is the high value. It's not serving balls. So that's really interesting to see that machines can teach you. I think there was stuff like that in like old movies, like Total Recall and other things. Here's another product, still in prototype, to help you learn music with also like closing the loop by not only recording, but also telling you about expressiveness, timing, pace, and all sorts of things. It's a company called Rody. Health. This is really exciting category because it has massive impact really on us. So there's devices to do personal diagnostic at home, on the go, with high fidelity. That means that instead of doing one checkup every year, you could have data every minute. Wearapeutics, that's also kind of a word we created. That's a combination of wearable and therapy. It's closing the loops, not just tracking, but actually healing you. And it's potentially competing with pharmaceutical companies. I'll give some examples of that. There's some new categories that are kind of moving, like mom tech, fertility. Tech giants also going into medical, around female health, glucose. And maybe the next step after treating issues with health is human augmentation. So if you can get back to your normal state, why not go over? Why not a digital Ritalin, for instance? So those are like the giants going into high tech. Probably heard of that. A few investments from Google and others. They're doing a lot in health tech. Blood is considered the gold standard for health, and there's, despite the Theranos debacle, there's actually a lot of really interesting startups doing real things, and there's a lot of investment in that space. Actually, at Hacks alone, we invested in 4 companies doing different types of diagnostic. One can test very quickly for blood type, really useful in emergency situations. Another one can test infectious diseases on the go as well, on the field. And a few others. So there's lots of different angles to blood. Gathering new data with new devices about erections, obsessions, and digestion, for example. First one is to test and diagnose erectile dysfunction to understand if it's physical or psychological problem. The second one can track things like body-focused repetitive behaviors, like nail biting, hair pulling, and the like. Those are typically unconscious, very difficult to treat. And the last one is a device that can recognize your food intolerances just based on analyzing your breath after you eat. Urine might be the next gold standard, no pun intended. It can help to diagnose diabetes, for instance. There's a lot of diabetes out there. One company we invested in is called Bisu, is doing just that, just a few minutes, and it can actually find a lot of really interesting data around hydration, fat metabolism, and other things. Fertility, pretty important topic. Population is aging, people are having babies later, women have trouble having babies, men are less fertile, there's all those problems. So there's a number of companies that are tackling this problem with different angles. One company we invested in is a Kegel that can actually analyze the most optimal time to conceive based on the analysis of the pH of the mucus. A few others are also taking care of other problems of mothers, such as getting more breast milk on the go. So it's today not a very convenient experience. And it's quite slow, it's quite interruptive, it's quite cumbersome. And you see a number of startups dealing with that. We actually invested in one company that you could call a soft robotics company, a little bit like Baymax in a Big Hero 6. So this is basically complementing the pumping action by massaging the breast. You can see the action. Looks actually quite enticing, even though I can't use it. Here's another one, soft robotic company. This one is for back pain to help relieve the spine so that you can retrain your back muscles, and then a few others. This one is to do brain stimulation using low voltage currents, so you can zap your brain to treat depression. Sounds like a plan. So what's next? Next slide. OK, let's go into industry. Enterprise. Trend is that now every industry is IoT. Mining, agriculture, construction, insurance, everything has IoT or could use IoT. Some approaches is about retrofitting what's already out there, adding sensors, for predictive maintenance, adding machine learning. Is also creating cheaper machines. So instead of giant machines cost a lot of money, creating desktop-sized things or just cheaper things in general to automate a number of repetitive tasks and also sometimes enable local manufacturing. New machines also to do like dull, dirty, dangerous tasks, and also smarter machines that are more flexible because they understand what's going on around them and they can adapt to the job and potentially also make custom products. So increased productivity, there's lots of areas for that. In the enterprise, for instance, just mentioning, it's kind of not really productivity, but it's kind of increasing ability to move around. Those are like all the bike sharing companies. The war continues. It's consolidating a little bit. Actually, Uber said they have like infinite appetite for acquisitions as long as the need is there and the technology is there. Here's a company that helps electric bikes just keep rolling by providing charging stations in different locations so that you can just replace the battery and always have your bike charged. Very simple, go into a store, give some extra business and extra foot traffic to the store. It's a company called PushMe, and you just get the battery there. Was partly inspired by this same system that already exists in China for phones, where you can actually do the battery like a rent chargers. Agriculture is a big problem as well, because as you know, the land is not infinite. There's just so much we can get out of it. You cannot not really expand that much. You try to put more input, make it more dense, but essentially the productivity is coming mostly from improvement in how you treat the land. So there's a number of startups that try to optimize that with sensors, with robots. We're actually quite active in that space. This one can test quality of fertilizer to understand the needs for more or less of it and the right combination. Food is another, of course, problem. There's a lot of money lost at the table, but also in the supply chain. Some companies trying to solve that. For example, one company we invested in called Amber is putting sensors into crop silos to avoid spoilage, to understand the humidity and the situation inside the silos. You can also improve things with livestock. This one helps. Oh, yeah, the video is a bit difficult to see. OK, I'm just going to skip that. OK, I'm just going to skip. Construction, another sector that hasn't really moved a whole lot. Now it's improving with ideas like digital twins, where you can see the project that's supposed to be built, compare the digital version to the real version to see where you're at. But there's also things you can do in the field. So for example, this company created a smart attachment for the workers' helmets to understand where they are, to give them notifications, and also to check for faults and other issues they might have, so that they're really networked in the field. Another example in mining. So typically mining, you send an expert. They kind of look at the tunnels that's been digged, and they look for cracks and safety, and they can analyze it. But mostly it's kind of eyeballing, and now you can have data, and it's much quicker and much safer. Energy, I'm going to skip that, but basically you can also save a lot of energy by improving the way you, for example, manage your air conditioning, not just in general, but room by room and automatically. And this one can adapt, can recognize the presence of somebody in the room and adapt to it, the vents automatically. So it's like tiny robots in your walls. Industrial, so you can see examples of service robots. This one cleans windows of high-rises. This one checks the tires of buses. This one can go around and bring heavy things across obstacles. So desktop machines, a number of them, coming out of factories, going into the field, from 3D metal to cutting. This is a fabric printer. You see that printing a sweater, bottom left. So service robots, actually introduced a few, so I'm just going to skip. This one is interesting. So cleaning robot. What's remarkable is that, look at people around it. This is in Singapore. This is a really new robot. It goes around, nobody cares. And I think that's the success. So this was a testing robot. I'm just going to skip that. And then industrial, obviously, big topic. China is the biggest buyer of industrial robots. And China is also creating a lot of new robots, a lot of cheaper robots. That's one of the smart robots that we invested in that has not only low cost, but also computer vision and able to work alongside humans, a kind of collaborative robot. So that's pretty much all I have. Final words. So overall hardware, it's not booming like crypto, but it's real. It's everywhere for tech and non-tech, mostly with health and B2B. That's the most appealing sectors today for investors. China definitely became masters of scale, but also innovation. And it's not sci-fi, but it's probably better and more useful. That's it. If you have any question, please email me, tweet to me, or meet me later. Thank you very much.